It was the day of my daughter's wedding. I should have been proud watching her walk down the aisle. But instead, I was sitting there ignored. Not a glance, not a word. When the moment came to sign the papers to release the $1 million bond I'd set aside for her, I said no. I'd given her everything. But this time I was going to make her face the truth. Have you ever been ignored by someone you loved? Tell me your story. The room buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. People were smiling, the air filled with excitement, but I felt like I wasn't even there. At the head of the table, my daughter Sarah stood next to her new husband, glowing. She hadn't even glanced my way since the ceremony started. Her eyes never met mine. Not once. The wedding went off without a hitch. Everyone praised how beautiful the day was, how perfect everything had turned out. But as I watched her interact with her friends and family, something sat heavily in my chest. It was as though I didn't exist. I had made sacrifices, given everything for her, and yet there I sat, forgotten, invisible. The moment came. The one where I was supposed to sign the papers releasing the $1 million bond I'd set aside for Sarah's future. The moment that should have felt like a proud father giving his daughter the world. But instead, when she walked over to me, there was no joy in her smile. No warmth, no appreciation, just a cold expectation. "Please, Dad, we need your signature," she said, her voice flat. I could feel every pair of eyes on me waiting for me to do what I always did, step in, fix things, smooth things over. I glanced at her, really looked at her for the first time in a long while, and I saw it. The disregard, the entitlement. She wasn't asking for my approval anymore. She was demanding it as if it were owed to her. I couldn't move. My hand hovered over the paper, but I couldn't bring myself to sign. The words were lodged in my throat, caught somewhere between the desire to speak and the overwhelming tide of anger and hurt that had been building up for years. "No," I said. Sarah's expression faltered for a moment, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. Then, just as quickly, it was replaced with a guarded expression masking whatever disappointment or anger she might have felt. But I could see it. I could feel the shift, the tension that now separated us. She didn't understand. She didn't know how deeply her actions had cut me. I wasn't just refusing to sign papers. I was refusing to let myself be ignored any longer, to let her take me for granted. The room went silent for a beat. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes, the pressure, the judgment. But I stayed still. I didn't flinch, didn't look away. The coolness in my chest matched the blankness in her face. A battle had just begun. She'd made her move. Now it was my turn. "Dad," Sarah repeated, but this time there was no urgency in her voice, only the underlying irritation of someone who thought they had the upper hand. I leaned back in my chair, looking at her, with nothing but calm. "I won't sign until you understand what you've done," I said, my tone steady but unyielding. "You need to face the consequences." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah glanced around the room, seeking support, but none came. She was alone now in more ways than one. And so was I. No one spoke, no one moved. The music played in the background, but I couldn't hear it anymore. It was as if the world had stopped for just a moment. The weight of the decision sat between us, heavy and undeniable. After the wedding, things didn't settle down as I expected. The weight of what had happened at the reception still sat heavily on me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had done the right thing by refusing to sign. Yet part of me kept wondering if I had gone too far. I thought about how much I had sacrificed for Sarah, how much I'd done for her all these years. Was it too much to ask for a little respect in return? At first, the silence felt like a relief, but it didn't last. I had hoped that maybe by walking away from that moment things would cool down. I could pretend the tension wasn't real, that everything would eventually work itself out. But that wasn't the case. My phone buzzed with messages. I didn't even have to look to know what they were about. People were talking. They had seen what happened, and now they had an opinion. The rumors started quickly, too quickly. Whispers about me being stubborn, too controlling about how I had taken a family event and turned it into a battlefield. Everyone seemed to see Sarah as the victim, the daughter under pressure, while I was painted as the unyielding father who just couldn't let go. I'd always tried to protect her, to give her what she needed, but now it felt as though I was the one under attack. I had done what I thought was right, and yet the very people I'd trusted were turning on me. I knew they were just parroting what they'd heard, but that didn't make it sting any less. It was like the walls were closing in. I had always prided myself on being the one who kept everything together, but now everything felt like it was slipping through my fingers. It wasn't just the rumors. I could feel the shift in my own relationships. People in the office began to treat me differently. Colleagues who used to joke with me now gave me sideways glances, barely acknowledging me in meetings. It was like there was this unspoken understanding that I had crossed a line. I could see the judgment in their eyes. The more I tried to ignore it, the harder it became to breathe. I tried to push it all out of my mind. Work, the house, everything felt distant, like I was walking through life on autopilot. But there was still this knot in my stomach, a tightness that wouldn't let go. Then David called. I hadn't spoken to him much in the past few months, not since the last time we met at the golf course. He was one of the few people who seemed to understand me, who wasn't quick to judge. "John," he said, when I picked up his voice, low and steady, "I know you're probably getting flooded with messages, but listen, I think you need to hear something. Let's grab a drink later. I think we need to talk." I agreed without hesitation. If there was anyone who might have a different perspective, it was David. He wasn't afraid to call me out when I was wrong, but he also didn't rush to conclusions. We met at the usual place, a quiet bar on the corner of Main Street, the kind of place where no one asked questions. I took my seat and ordered a whiskey. David showed up a few minutes later, looking just as calm as always. We exchanged brief pleasantries before he got right to it. "Listen," he began, his eyes studying me with that familiar intensity. "I know this situation with Sarah has been rough, but you're making it harder than it needs to be." I leaned back in my chair, trying to keep my emotions in check. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice tight. David didn't hesitate. "You're stuck in this idea that you're the only one who knows what's best for her. You've been her protector, but now you're letting that control you. You're not seeing the bigger picture. She's your daughter, John. You have to give her room to grow, even if that means she makes mistakes." His words stung, but I didn't interrupt. It felt like he was reading my mind, speaking the things I was too afraid to admit to myself. "I'm not saying you're wrong about everything," he continued, "but there's a middle ground here. You can't just shut her out because of one mistake, and you can't let the world tell you how to handle your own daughter." I wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't understand. But deep down I knew he was right. The truth was, I wasn't sure what to do next. I had already made my stand, and now I was stuck in the aftermath. "You're right," I said slowly, staring into my glass. "But I don't know how to move forward from here. I've already drawn the line. If I go back now, it feels like I'm saying it's okay to disrespect me." David leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. "John, you're not forgiving her by letting go of your pride. You're doing it because you care about her, and that's what she needs. Maybe you don't have to give in to everything, but you can't let this one moment define your relationship." I sat there for a long time, thinking about what David had said. I didn't have all the answers, and I wasn't ready to forgive Sarah for everything. But I realized I had to stop holding on to the anger. I had to find a way to move forward for both of us. "Thanks, David," I muttered, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was a step in the right direction. It didn't take long for the rumors to start swirling. At first I ignored them, thinking they were just whispers from people who didn't know the full story. But then the pieces began to fall into place, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. One of Sarah's friends reached out to me. She seemed nervous, glancing around before she spoke, as if she wasn't sure whether she was betraying someone. "John," she said, "I need to tell you something." Sarah. "She's been talking about how she wanted to protect the family from your control. She said you were suffocating her." The words hit me harder than I expected. Protect the family. From me, I couldn't make sense of it. All these years, all I'd done was protect her, give her everything she could need. And now she was painting me as the villain. My heart pounded as I tried to piece it all together. Was this the truth? Or was it just another manipulation to make me feel like I was wrong? I had never questioned my decisions before, not like this. I spent days replaying the moments with Sarah. The wedding, her coldness, her dismissive attitude. Had I overreacted? Was I too rigid in my approach? Had I been wrong to try to hold on to control, to demand respect? She was my daughter. I loved her. But now, I wasn't sure anymore. I had made it clear that I wouldn't just sign the papers because she asked me to. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions. But what if there was more to her side of the story? What if I had misunderstood her completely? The doubts gnawed at me, growing more persistent each day. The anger I'd felt after the wedding began to mix with a deep, sinking guilt. Maybe I was the one who needed to change. Maybe I wasn't being fair. Maybe she didn't deserve the treatment I'd given her. But as my mind wrestled with uncertainty, the situation continued to escalate. Sarah, with her newfound control over the family finances, had begun tightening her grip. She became more involved in the company's dealings, monitoring every decision I made, scrutinizing every move I took. Emails that I needed access to were suddenly delayed. Important meetings where I should have been included were canceled or rescheduled. Every attempt I made to manage the business was met with resistance. At first, I thought it was just a phase, that maybe Sarah was just testing her boundaries. But it wasn't a phase. She was systematically taking control, slowly but surely. It became clear if I didn't act, I would lose everything. I had no choice but to start fighting back. But not in the way I had before. I wasn't going to confront her head-on. Not yet. Instead, I started gathering evidence. I began recording conversations. Little things at first, small comments, things I could use later if it came to that. I documented every inconsistency, every suspicious action she took. Every time I saw her involved in company affairs, I made sure to take note. It wasn't easy sneaking around, pretending like everything was fine, but I had to be careful. I couldn't let Sarah catch on. She would figure it out if I wasn't careful. I also started cutting off contact with people who could be a threat, the ones who were too loyal to her or too quick to side with her. They didn't know the full story, but that didn't matter. If they were on her side, they were potential liabilities. It was exhausting, but it was the only way to keep a hold of what was mine. What had been mine. Every time I added a new piece to the puzzle, every time I gained a little more control, the weight on my shoulders lightened just a little. But there was still a lingering sense of doubt. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing my daughter. That in my attempt to protect my position, I was pushing her further away. Maybe David was right. Maybe I didn't have to shut Sarah out completely. But then again, if I didn't take a stand now, how much more would I let her take from me before I said enough I wasn't ready to give up yet? But as I watched Sarah's influence grow, I started to wonder how long I could hold on before everything slipped through my fingers. The quiet moments were the hardest. When I wasn't actively working, fighting, strategizing, that's when the doubts crept in the most. That's when the guilt threatened to overtake me. I wasn't sure what the right answer was anymore. The first move from Sarah came just days after I'd started to process everything. The phone call was brief, but the message was clear. She wanted me to sign a new agreement, one that would grant her even more control over the family business. It was drafted in a way that on the surface looked like a simple update to some old paperwork. But I saw it for what it truly was, a way to take away the last vestiges of power I had. I could feel the weight of the request before she even asked. It wasn't the words that hit me so hard, but the way she said them, calm, collected, as though she already knew what I would do, as though my answer didn't matter. I need you to sign this. It'll secure the future of the company and our family. You know it's for the best, Sarah said over the phone, her voice dripping with an almost rehearsed sweetness. It's just a formality, Dad. I knew what she was doing. It wasn't just about the company or the money. It was about asserting her dominance, finishing what she had started. She wanted to break me, to strip me of any last bit of control I had left. I didn't say anything at first. The silence was thick, and I could almost hear her waiting for me to give in. I could feel her presence even through the phone line, as if she were standing there in front of me, staring me down. I wasn't going to let her win. No, I finally said, my voice steady, though I could feel the fire in my chest. I won't sign that. Her response was immediate, almost too swift. You don't have a choice, Dad. This is for the family. You can't keep holding on to the past. You're just hurting yourself. My mind raced. I knew what I had to do. The longer I delayed, the more ground she would gain. But I wasn't ready to act out of fear. I couldn't make that mistake. I had to play this carefully. I had to think this through. I put the phone down and let out a breath. I had to stay calm. The real fight was coming, and it wasn't just about the papers. It was about everything I had built and everything Sarah was trying to take away from me. The next few days were tense, to say the least. Sarah didn't back off. Instead, she began to escalate. She started moving behind the scenes, making calls to key people in the company, changing things without my consent. She pushed hard, trying to corner me into submission. But I wasn't going to be pushed that easily. I had built this empire from the ground up. I wasn't going to watch it all crumble just because my daughter thought she was entitled to everything. Sarah's next move was swift and ruthless. She managed to push through a deal without consulting me, something that would impact the company's long-term future. When I found out, I couldn't believe it. She had essentially signed away part of the company without any input from me. The decision she made was financially damaging. She had made a deal with one of our biggest partners, one that shifted the control of a key portion of the business into their hands. And I wasn't just losing power over the company, I was losing trust. I could feel it in the reactions of the people around me. They started pulling away, questioning my ability to lead. I had always been the one everyone relied on. Now I felt like I was the one being thrown under the bus. I felt the sting of it all, every person who turned their back on me, every glance that lingered just a bit too long. I was losing everything I had worked for. Not just the business, but the respect, the legacy. And the one person I thought would understand Sarah was the one driving the knife in deeper. But I wasn't going to back down. This wasn't just about money or power anymore. This was about what I stood for. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my sense of self. If I didn't act, I would lose everything I had left. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't fight Sarah directly, not yet. I had to be smarter than that. I would have to outplay her, to use her own moves against her. But first I needed more information. I needed a plan. So I began to work in the shadows. Every conversation she had, every deal she made, I took note of. I started recording things, saving documents. The more I gathered, the more I realized how much she had already taken and how much I was willing to lose to get it back. I began to set traps. I started disconnecting myself from people who could hurt me, people who had sided with Sarah or who were too eager to take her side. They didn't know it yet, but I was already preparing for my counterattack. This was war, and I was done being the one who just took the hits. It was time to fight back. But it wasn't just Sarah I had to worry about. It was everyone else who had stopped believing in me. I was going to have to prove myself again, not just to Sarah, but to everyone who doubted me. As the days dragged on, I realized one thing: I wasn't just fighting for control over a company. I was fighting to reclaim my life, my future. And Sarah was no longer the only one who had something to lose. The battle lines had been drawn, and I wasn't going to lose this fight. The message came to me late one night, an anonymous tip that set everything into motion. I didn't know who sent it or why, but it didn't matter. The content was enough to stop my heart for a moment. Sarah had been making moves behind the scenes, undermining me in ways I had never anticipated. She was manipulating the family's assets, funneling money, making decisions that weren't hers to make. The weight of it hit me all at once. I thought back to moments I had brushed off, things I had excused, like the times Sarah had acted strangely when discussing family matters, her constant need to control conversations about the company. She'd always had a way of sidestepping the uncomfortable parts of our relationship, but now I saw it clearly. The signs were there, and I had ignored them. She had been playing me from the start. I felt the old anger rise in me again, but now it was sharper. It wasn't just betrayal, it was deliberate, calculated. My daughter had turned against me in the most calculated way possible, and I had been blind to it. I had trusted her. I had given her everything. But that trust was gone. David called the next morning as if he knew I needed someone to talk to. "You've been quiet lately," he said, his voice steady, unassuming. "You all right?" I didn't want to talk. Didn't want to admit what was really happening, but I knew I had to. I told him about the message, about Sarah, about the way things had spiraled. David didn't waste time. "John, I know you've been trying to hold on to some version of what you thought was your daughter, but this isn't about love or family anymore. This is about power control. She's not the person you think she is, and you need to stop seeing her through that lens." His words stung. I had known on some level that things weren't right, but hearing him say it out loud made it all feel too real. "But she's my daughter." I said the words, tasting bitter. "How can I just walk away from her?" "You don't walk away," David said, his voice firm but not unkind. "You stop letting her walk all over you. You stop letting her use you for her own gain. You're not the villain here, John. Don't let her turn you into one." I was silent for a long time, letting his words sink in. The truth was, I hadn't wanted to see it. I hadn't wanted to face the fact that Sarah wasn't just making mistakes, she was actively working against me, against everything I had built. When I hung up the phone, the decision was clearer than it had ever been. The problem was, Sarah was already ahead of me. She knew I was onto her, and she wasn't about to back down. The more I tried to push back, the tighter she gripped the reins. I found out that she had begun spreading lies about me, painting me as someone who refused to move on, who was too controlling and outdated. She told anyone who would listen that I was unwilling to let go of the past, that I was hindering her ability to do what was best for the family. People who had once supported me now started to distance themselves. In Sarah's eyes, I was the obstacle in her way, and she was doing everything she could to make me look like the bad guy. Her campaign worked. Slowly, people started to doubt me. The people who had been my allies now whispered behind my back. They thought I was too rigid, too stubborn. It wasn't just a fight for the company anymore. It wasn't just about losing control over some documents or signatures. It was about something much deeper: my reputation, my name. Everything I had worked for was crumbling. I had been silent for too long, and now Sarah had gone too far. She wasn't just playing a game of manipulation, she was trying to destroy me, trying to strip away every ounce of power I had left. and I was letting her. I could no longer afford to stay passive. I needed to take back control. The next morning, I went into the office prepared to face her head on. I wouldn't let her take what was mine anymore. But as I walked into the conference room, I could see she had already begun to move her pieces. The board was set. The people she had manipulated, the ones she'd turned against me, were sitting around the table awaiting her instructions. I wasn't surprised. She was already playing her hand, and I had no choice but to respond. I stood at the front of the room, trying to remain calm, trying to project authority, even though I knew my entire world was falling apart. Sarah. I began, keeping my voice steady. I know what you're doing. I know what you've been up to. The room went quiet. Her eyes flicked to the others around the table, then back to me, as if she were trying to decide how to respond. I've given you everything. I continued, my words coming out colder than I intended. And now you're trying to take it all, but I won't let you. Not this time. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, with a casual shrug, she said, "You don't have a choice, Dad. You've already lost." I spent the next few days meticulously gathering evidence. Every email, every document, every conversation, anything that could show Sarah's actions for what they truly were. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was calculating, studying the situation with a clear mind. I'd learned long ago that emotions only clouded your judgment. What I needed now was a strategy. David was still there, a constant presence offering advice and perspective. He was always calm, always methodical. He reminded me that this wasn't a battle of emotions anymore, but a battle for control, for what was rightfully mine. He told me I needed to be smart. I needed to let the evidence speak for itself. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Sarah was smarter than I had given her credit for. She had been working on this for months, maybe even longer. She knew how to hide her tracks. But she had made one mistake: she underestimated me. The more I dug, the clearer it became. Contracts, emails, financial statements, all of it pointed back to Sarah. She had been making decisions about the company without my approval, moving money where it didn't belong, and redirecting assets to partners who would only benefit her. It wasn't just manipulation. It was fraud. And if I could prove it, everything she had done would be exposed. The documents piled up on my desk, evidence of the web she had spun. With each new piece of information, my resolve grew stronger. But with that strength came a realization: the more I uncovered, the more I knew that things weren't just going to stay within the family anymore. The legal and social implications of what Sarah had done were massive. This wasn't just a family dispute. It was going to involve the courts, the media, and every person who had ever supported me. I had no choice but to go public. The thought of airing this dirty laundry out in the open made my stomach churn. But what was the alternative? Let her destroy everything I'd built? I knew I had to move fast. As I sat there analyzing the papers, a feeling of dread crept over me. Something didn't sit right. The situation was spiraling, and I wasn't sure who I could trust anymore. The more I thought about it, the more the warning signs came into focus. The phone calls had started a few days ago, strange, unfamiliar numbers that hung up the moment I answered. At first I thought it was just a coincidence, but now the pattern was too obvious. Sarah wasn't just undermining me within the family. She was trying to intimidate me, force me into making mistakes. It wasn't just the phone calls. A couple of times I'd noticed someone following me, just a shadow in the distance. At first I chalked it up to paranoia, but the more it happened, the more certain I became that someone was watching me. This wasn't just a fight for power anymore. It was becoming something more dangerous, something that could threaten my safety. And yet I couldn't back down. I had come this far. I could hear David's voice in my head, calm and reassuring. Don't let fear control you. The truth is on your side. but the fear was real. I had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me, my business, my family, my reputation now being targeted from all sides. And Sarah was at the center of it all. The calls kept coming, and the shadowing became more obvious. There was no way I could ignore it any longer. I had to act. I couldn't let her or anyone else keep me in the dark any longer. I wasn't sure how much longer I had before she made her next move, but I knew I had to be ready. I started taking extra precautions. I changed my phone number, and when I went out, I made sure to take different routes to avoid the same eyes following me. It wasn't much, but it gave me a sense of control, something I hadn't felt in weeks. And then the worst part came: the threats. It wasn't just phone calls anymore. I received a text message late one night: "Stop digging. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." The message was anonymous, but it was clear who it was from. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had already made my decision. I was done being passive. It was time to take the fight to her, but I had to be careful. I needed to be smart. If I moved too quickly, I'd tip her off. I needed to gather more evidence, finish what I started. The next step was clear. I needed to expose Sarah for what she truly was. No more hiding, no more second-guessing. She had forced my hand, and now there was no turning back. With each passing day, I felt the walls closing in on her. She had no idea how close I was to breaking her, to bringing everything into the light. But I wasn't going to rush it. I had to be patient. Every move needed to be calculated. I closed the files on my desk and sat back, feeling the weight of what I had to do. The threat had been made clear. The danger was real. But it didn't matter. I wasn't backing down. I would see this through. There was no other choice. The storm hit unexpectedly, like a thunderclap out of nowhere. The legal battle Sarah had initiated came crashing down just when I thought I had regained some control. One morning I received a letter that changed everything. The company's major investors, backed by Sarah's influence, had filed a lawsuit claiming that my management had violated certain terms in our contracts. It wasn't just about money anymore. This was a full-on attack on my ability to manage the company. The very people who had once supported me were now questioning my leadership, siding with her. The shock was immediate, followed by the cold weight of dread. Sarah had used the company's financial interests to her advantage, manipulating the investors into believing I was holding them back. She wasn't just trying to take control. She was dismantling everything I had worked for, piece by piece. I wasn't just losing the business. I could feel the ground slipping beneath me, the relationships I had built with my colleagues and friends, now hanging by a thread. I was losing everything: my reputation, my position, and my family. The battle had already spilled into the courts, and the stakes were higher than ever. I stood on the edge of it all, staring into the abyss. The pressure was suffocating. The endless calls from my lawyer, the accusations from the board, the whispers from those around me, it was all too much. I felt as though the walls were closing in, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep up this fight. Every step I took seemed to lead to another setback. It was a slow, grinding spiral that was wearing me down. But in that moment when everything seemed to be collapsing, something inside me snapped. The fear, the doubt, it all had to stop. If I gave in now, everything I had built would be gone. I wouldn't let Sarah win. Not like this. Not after everything. I took a deep breath and called David. He had been my sounding board through this entire ordeal, but now I needed him more than ever. "You're not done yet, John," he said when I explained the situation to him. His voice was calm, steady, just like always. "You've come this far, and you can still turn this around. But you need to stop panicking. You're better than this. You've been playing her game all along. Now it's time for you to change the rules." His words were exactly what I needed to hear. I couldn't let the fear of losing everything control me any longer. The battle was far from over, but if I wanted to win, I needed to think strategically. The emotions that had clouded my judgment had to be put aside. It was time to act, not react. As I sat in my office that afternoon going over the latest round of legal documents, the weight of what I had to do next became clear. I wasn't just dealing with Sarah anymore. She had brought the full force of her allies into this, and every move I made from here on out had to count. Then the final blow came. A friend from my old law firm, someone I had trusted, betrayed me. He gave Sarah the upper hand by providing her with critical documents that could further weaken my case. I couldn't believe it. I had always considered this person a friend, but now I saw him for what he truly was. Everything started to feel like it was slipping through my fingers, and in that moment I thought I might break. But then the thought hit me. I had one final card to play. For weeks I had been looking through every piece of paper, every contract, every email, trying to find something, anything, that would give me the leverage I needed to expose Sarah for what she truly was. I spent hours combing through old records in the office, searching for a crack in her plan, a way to turn the tables. And then there it was. A document I hadn't even thought to check. A contract from years ago before Sarah had even started making moves. It was buried in the back of a file, just a random piece of paperwork that at first glance seemed unimportant. But when I read it, everything clicked into place. Sarah had been acting illegally long before I even knew what was going on. The document proved that she had intentionally manipulated her way into a position of power in the company, violating the terms of her agreement with me and the board. It was a smoking gun. I knew this was it. This was the proof I needed to put everything into perspective to expose her for what she truly was: a liar, a manipulator, and a fraud. I called David immediately. He listened to me explain what I had found. "This is it, John," he said. "You've got her. It's time to turn the tide. I couldn't afford to wait any longer. I needed to act fast." With David's help, I formulated a plan. We would bring this document to the board, to the public, and show them exactly what Sarah had been doing. It wouldn't just be a legal battle anymore. This was going to be her public reckoning. As I made the call to my lawyer, ready to push forward with the lawsuit and the public exposure. Sarah had underestimated me, and now I was going to make her pay for it. The weight of everything finally settled, and I could see the truth more clearly than ever before. For all these years I had convinced myself that my love for Sarah was enough to protect her, that my sacrifices would ensure she understood. But love had never been enough to shield us from the truth. It never protected me from the betrayal, and it hadn't protected her from becoming someone I didn't recognize. I had given everything I had to her, my time, my energy, my resources. But somewhere along the way, I forgot one crucial thing: that I too had the right to be respected. And that respect couldn't come from sacrificing my boundaries, my dignity, my own worth. In the days following Sarah's downfall, as the pieces of the legal battle fell into place, and the truth about her actions became public, I began to redefine myself. For so long, I had been the one holding everything together, the one doing everything for everyone else. But no more. I had spent so many years trying to be the perfect father, the perfect provider, the perfect protector, but I had neglected myself in the process. The victory in court was bittersweet. I had won, yes. But at what cost? Sarah lost everything she had worked to take from me: her position in the company, the control she had fought so hard for. But I couldn't take joy in her downfall. There was no satisfaction in watching her lose, only emptiness. Sarah had to face the consequences of her actions. It wasn't just the legal repercussions, there was also the social and emotional fallout. People who had once admired her now saw her for what she truly was. The weight of that realization was something she would carry for the rest of her life. But I had learned long ago that nothing good came from holding on to bitterness. "Sarah, I won't ever forgive you for what you did," I said to her the last time we spoke, my voice calm and firm. "But I won't carry this weight anymore. You've lost everything, but that's on you. I'm done. I'm done with all of this." She didn't say anything. I don't think she could. Maybe she understood for the first time that love isn't enough to fix everything. That respect is earned, not just given because of blood or a title. It was then I realized I wasn't just walking away from Sarah. I was walking away from everything that had kept me chained to the past. The anger, the resentment, the guilt, it was all behind me. I didn't need to fix her anymore. I couldn't. And I wasn't going to let her take me down with her. I had a life to rebuild, and it wasn't going to be shaped by her choices or her mistakes. The days that followed were strangely peaceful. I spent less time looking over my shoulder, less time wondering what Sarah was doing or how her actions might affect me. There were still legal proceedings to follow through, but I no longer felt the constant pressure weighing on my chest. The burden of being trapped in a family war had lifted. I found peace in the little things. My mornings felt lighter. The world didn't seem as heavy, and for the first time in a long time, I could breathe without thinking about what I had lost. It wasn't that I had forgotten what had happened, or that I didn't still feel the sting of betrayal. It was simply that I had stopped letting it control me. As the weeks went on, I started to look for new opportunities. The company was still mine, and I was still in control, but I realized that I didn't have to stay in the place where I had been so broken. I had spent my life building something, but it wasn't worth it if it meant staying in a constant state of war. I began to make changes. I hired a new team of people who believed in my vision, not in the old version of myself, but the new one I was becoming. I reached out to people I hadn't spoken to in years, rebuilt relationships that I had let slip away. It wasn't about replacing what I had lost, but about finding something better. Something that was mine and mine alone. And when I finally decided to leave the city to start fresh in a place where no one knew my story, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't thought was possible. I was no longer tied to the past, no longer defined by the choices I had made in a moment of pain. I was walking away from the life that had broken me, and in doing so, I was finally beginning to heal. I left behind the house, the office, the memories. The life I had once known was gone, but in its place I was finding something new, a new peace, a new purpose, and this time it was mine.